names.
I guess that's better than the vampire voice, maybe? And it's relevant.
It's terrible.
Come on.
It's terrible.
I asked y'all a question. What are your names? Who are you?
I'm Delaila Lugo.
Jason Kwasnicki, and I'll buy it at a high price.
I'm Mark Sullivan. This is another episode of Reap the Spoils. This is a monthly spoiler cast where we play a video game, and then we talk about it. We spoil the hell out of it. Go top to bottom, front to back. Talk about the story. Talk about the gameplay. Talk about everything.
Talk about them herbs.
Them herbs. Them sweet, sweet, disembodied and glued back together by weird rubbing alcohol first aid meds. All right, Delilah, what game are we talking about?
Resident Evil 7. Sorry, I can't do a good voice.
You guys both suck.
Shit, maybe I should have had Jason do that. Oh well, too late. Yeah, we're talking about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Can't forget the Biohazard. That's that's officially part of the. I don't care. I don't give a shit. Talking about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. What?
All I was gonna say is, yeah, I guess the bylines are now important because we got Resident Evil 8 Village or whatever.
It's not. Yeah, apparently 8's not even part of the title technically. It's just Resident Evil Village.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that at the end though. This is about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So, keeping with the point of the show, if you have not played Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, I strongly recommend that you go and do so. A, it's a really good game, and B, I don't want us to be the thing that ruins that game for you. I don't want you to listen to us talk about it and then go play it, because that ruins a lot of the surprise and a lot of the conclusions you'll come to yourself. So go play the game, then come back and listen to this episode. I also want to give the caveat of there's a free DLC called Not a Hero. We're going to be talking briefly about all the DLC. I'm just going to spitfire through them just to talk about them briefly. So go play all the DLC if you really want to, but at least play Not a Hero. It's free. It's kind of important to the ending of the game, in my opinion. We'll talk about it, but go play the game and go play Not a Hero. That all done and said, shall we jump to a history lesson?
Yes.
Go for it.
All right. So, we had a Resident Evil 6 come out in 2012. Did y'all play that game?
That we did. No.
I did not.
No.
So, I'm actually probably gonna... Go ahead, what?
I was going to say, as much as I enjoyed Resident Evil 5, even as much as I enjoyed that game, just punching meteors in a volcano, it got a little too much for me.
We haven't spoiled Resident Evil 5 yet. Come on, man. Yeah, Resident Evil 6, it's a wild ride. It's definitely not even, I feel like it's not even arguable the black sheep of the series, of at least the mainline series. But that came out. What did I say?
5.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, 6. Sorry. Resident Evil 6, definitely the black sheep of the franchise. That came out in 2012. So 2013, there was an initial version of Resident Evil 7 in 2013 that was still action focused. And Resident Evil 6, for those who don't know, was extremely action focused. It's hardly a survival horror game.
To be fair, the Resident Evil 4 proved that it's not necessarily a bad thing.
If we really want to go deep into the history of the Resident Evil franchise, really Resident Evil 2 is where it started becoming slowly more action focused, all the way culminating in 4 being a huge diverging point for the series, going pretty balls to the wall action. But 4 still had a great atmosphere that was spooky and at times scary. And 5 obviously went more towards action, and 6 was just crazy nonstop action. So Resident Evil, the initial version of Resident Evil 7, 2013, was more action-focused and actually took a lot of inspiration from the 1981 classic, The Evil Dead. That was 81,
I
right,
had no
Jason?
It was
idea. That's
80,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I believe it was 81.
I
It
didn't
was
know
weird.
this either.
I thought they talked a lot about Chainsaw Massacre. I don't remember, but
I
But
could definitely see that.
following that, they decided to go with a more immersive experience and not only changed the game from being to being in a single location. Again, Resident Evil 6 takes place in like 6 different locations.
Yeah.
This is just they scoped it down to a single location and decided to make the change for the first time in the franchise, at least the mainline franchise, to first person. I think like Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles, they're railgun shooters.
there was a Wii game. It was basically like an old school Time Crisis shooter. Yeah,
That's those 2 games, and I think there might have been another light gun shooter in the franchise. There's lots of weird spin-off games in the Resident Evil franchise, but anyway, this is the first time
playing Resident Evil is like it's like being invested in comic books. It's all over the place.
So yeah, for the first time in the main series, they went first person with this one, and that development started in 2014. They didn't start doing development for VR until 2015. So all those people that think that they went first person just for VR, is definitely a great idea, but it's not the main reason that they decided to do it. Another thing that I wanted to note is that for the first time in the series, the narrative designer was a Westerner, not a Japanese native. It was a Western guy, Richard Percy, who previously worked on the expansion packs for Fear and also Spec Ops: The Line.
A lot.
Yeah. Spec Ops: The Line, I think I brought this up in a past episode. I definitely want to do an episode on Spec Ops: The Line someday. But yeah, for first time in the series, brought a Westerner on to write the narrative. The game, as we all know, developed in-house using the RE engine. I believe it was the first game to do it. And now it's Capcom's bread and butter. I think pretty much all games since that game, or since Resident Evil 7, have been made in the RE engine.
It's an impressive engine, too.
It's really, really, really impressive. They showed a demo. It was a VR demo in E3 2015, and it was just called Kitchen. Do you guys remember this?
Yes.
No.
You don't remember, Delilah?
No.
It was I remember hearing about it, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds so cool." It was just a demo, a VR demo of you through the eyes of some guy like tied to a chair sitting across from another guy, and there was this like this creepy like demonic lady, I think, that was torturing the other guy and then came up and spooked you. And nobody really knew what this was. It was just called Kitchen, and apparently I don't remember this. I found out about this while I was reading. They changed the T in Kitchen to be a 7, or they stylized it that way.
Oh, I remember now. Okay,
Yeah, and,
sorry.
that was
I had a lapse in memory.
that was a hint that nobody picked up on, seemingly, that they did that, because no one really knew what this was. They were just like, oh, it was so scary, and it was in VR, and we didn't find out until the following E3 in 2016 that this game was Resident Evil 7. And that same week, they dropped a demo called Resident Evil 7 Beginning Hour.
Yeah.
And that was a weird one. Because it takes place during the section in the old house, like at the very beginning of the game. Obviously, without any of the plot implications, you don't know anything about Mia. You don't even know who you are. You go through and you find the videotape and play through the videotape of through Clancy's eyes with the other reporters, and you play that videotape out, get taken by Jack at the end, and they actually updated that demo later that year with more things to do and a whole nother the hallway leading down to the basement, added that in to explore that, and also introduce the Molded to people ahead of the game's release, which was interesting. I played it a couple times. I think I got all the endings that you could in that demo. I think there were like 3 or 4. just through different
Really?
means. Yeah, it was interesting. And also,
I only played it once. I didn't realize there were multiple endings
I think
to a demo.
I think I was just so hungry for that game that I played it multiple times. And when they patched it, they had different endings. Like there was an ending if you went to the back door versus the attic, and there was an ending for going to the attic. If you got there without taking any damage from the molded in the basement, I think you actually get away and you get a special like thing at the end, some special message or some shit. I don't remember. But yeah, I remember there being multiple endings, and you could also find one of the coins during that demo, and if you found that, you'd get an extra coin in the main game when it came out, which was pretty neat. But anyway, yeah, they put out that demo. The game eventually came out in North America on January 24th, 2017. Came out, I think, a couple days later in Japan. And yeah, that's kind of the brief history of Resident Evil 7.
Excellent. I forgot about a lot of that.
Yeah, I kind of did too.
I for some reason thought that kitchen demo was Tokyo Game Show. That's why I was a little thrown off.
Gotcha. I mean, I think it was even shown then too, probably, because it was a whole year between them showing kitchen and them revealing the game. So it probably made the rounds several times. Jason, you're very quiet.
No, I'm just waiting for us to get into it.
Well, you want to get into it right now?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into it. Let's I guess final warning, go play the game before listening further, but let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the ending, as we like to do here at Reap the Spoils. Yeah, so how did you guys feel about the kind of final third of the game info dump?
I think that it's in Resident Evil fashion to connect it to this genetically modified human bioweapon, of course.
Yeah.
So I thought it was I don't want to say a clever way to introduce it, but when you're playing this game, you could think, oh, this is just a crazy like trailer trash family that's like really nasty. But then like you're wondering like where the mold comes in, and so this is just the way to connect that. But this whole idea of like family and this little girl being like programmed to really want a family and then like takes control of people, it didn't sit well with me, and it actually was the part of the game that I liked the least. Anything that involved her.
See,
okay.
I actually I appreciated because it did by Hollywood has the rule of 3. If you're going to bring something up kind of out of nowhere towards the end, you at least foreshadow it 3 times. And I believe this game actually foreshadowed Evelyn exactly 3 times before you actually get this whole dump about her. Like you see her once run around a corner very early on, and then you see like there's a shrine when you're getting one of the arm. I think it's the arm. And then later on in that very same area, you see her, and then a bunch of mold comes out and mold. So
I mean, I would argue
you are seeing her, and you're hearing references to her from the Baker family. So like you always know that there's something going on beyond the Bakers.
Yeah.
So the whole fungal aspect, though, like you can tell a Westerner wrote it. For one, he definitely ripped that straight out of The Last of Us.
I knew you were gonna say,
especially because I actually read the notes in the lab, and like the way they talk about the fungal behavior, the science behind it is literally exactly the way they talk about it in The Last of Us.
Well,
I mean, it's legit. It's legit. I'm not like saying it's like,
it's possible
you
it
can't
could have taken
taken
some sort of inspiration, but I don't know that it flat out ripped it. I feel like that's a pretty, like, we have one major piece of pop culture multimedia that has done something like that. I feel like it's and it was super successful. I don't think it's totally unheard of or totally a bad idea to go and do that some more.
I'm not. They did it. It's not like I'm not trying to say they copycatted.
I know.
They did it in an entirely different way, and I actually really liked the way they combined it with I know it's a terrible movie, but like a guilty pleasure of mine is The Ring. I fucking love that shit.
I like that movie too, actually.
Little girls with fucking shaggy hair
That
and they're
was
fucking like demons and
that was
shit.
the first movie that I can think of, the earliest movie I can think of to make it so that I was scared
It's
after
the
watching
only
that
it's
movie so
yeah,
much.
it's the
Yeah.
only it's the only horror movie that's ever actually scared me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not scared by like slasher films because it's always like you can just put a
They're
shotgun to their
campy.
face. Yeah, you can just put a shotgun to their face and blow it off. Like this is just a demon girl that comes out
Yeah.
of a television. Forget the ring. My point is that this is a little demon girl, and they combine that with like science of the mold and how her behavior and her lust for family is a byproduct of the way mold and fungus behave. It was interesting, and I did like it.
Something you bring up, foreshadowing, something I never noticed until this playthrough, because I played through this game. Like, this might be my sixth playthrough of this game.
Wow.
I've played
Mhm.
this game. I love this game. I really really like this game. We'll talk
Same.
about the design a little more because I feel like it's starting to wane on me a little bit. But something I never noticed before was that when you enter the old house and you go down in the basement and find Mia, and you go into that one room to like try to leave, there's a photo sitting on like a
Mhm.
tray, and it says E-001 on the back, and you turn around and it's an old woman in a wheelchair.
Yeah, which
And
we should. Yeah, we should also mention that old woman you see
well,
the entire game
that's
also happens to be Evelyn.
that's
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm gonna get to. Is you go through all the events of the game, and you're picking up notes, and towards the end you go through the salt mine, and you go through the makeshift lab that Lucas has set up, and as you're reading these notes, you're finding out more about the E series mold, and you're finding out more about Evelyn. And one of the notes is Lucas giving a report to the connections, which we'll talk about when we get to Not a Hero. But he mentions that she's starting to she has the appearance of the 10-year-old girl. That's how we mostly know her as throughout the game. And you read this note that she's starting to rapidly age, and he doesn't know
Yeah.
why. He thinks that it has to do with the instability of not having her medication or whatever, and eventually she stabilizes. And once you finish through going through the mines, you come back to that same room in the basement, and that photo is still there for you to pick up and look at. And that's kind of a way for you to put the pieces together. The specimen was rapidly aging, eventually stabilized, and here's this mysterious photograph of this old woman in a wheelchair that you've seen throughout the game and you know really nothing about, because
And
no
you
one's
can't
ever
shoot her every time you aim at her. The game,
yeah,
like,
and no
moves your
one,
gun. Yeah.
the bakers never even acknowledge her. She just shows up in random hallways after big story beats occur, and she never says anything to you, does anything to you, and you can't do anything to her, and no one says a word about her. If you put those pieces together, yeah, you ultimately come to the climax of the game, where you go up to Evelyn and stick her with the syringe with the cure, and it's the old woman. It was a neat way of kind of putting the clues right in plain sight, and you could put them together yourself if you really sit there and think about it. I have a bad tendency with Resident Evil games to like read the notes but not really think about the notes.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's what happened to me the first time I played this game. Is I read the notes, but I didn't think about them. And there really was a lot of clues around. Like, besides the one you guys already mentioned, there were kids' drawings all over the house. There was actually a picture of Evelyn as a child in the staircase in the main hall on the second floor, right before you open that sneak key door. So there were a lot of clues. But yet I was still surprised at the end of the game to see that she was the old lady who I honestly thought was the homie this whole time, because she was the only thing not attacking me, and she was just there kind of chilling. And when I realized that like she's the main big bad, I was very surprised. So that piece of it I liked. It was the family part of it that threw me off a little bit, I guess.
And not for nothing, what I'll say about Resident Evil and these kind of notes that they scatter throughout the games, the reason I kind of never really think about them is because in games past with this franchise, they haven't really been all that much to think about. Sometimes they try to give you more information about the virus of that game, but for the most part, it's like you're in the Raccoon City Police Department and it's a cop that's just writing down what they were thinking about the day of the outbreak and giving kind of like set dressing, but nothing that's important to the overall plot, nothing that's important to the lore. It's just kind of it's just kind of setting the scene for the room that you're in and find that note in. This time going in with a different mindset and actually reading these things, thinking about these things, and trying to understand the events as the game was presenting them to me. The clues are all there, and it's actually it's really smart in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not like saying Resident Evil 4. You find a note by the lake, and it's like, hey, we found a salamander and put some Plagas on it and threw it in. I wonder what happened to that salamander. And then like 10 minutes later, you get to the boss fight with what are they?
Alago.
What is the name of the? Yeah. They definitely made better use of the side notes and whatnot in this game than Resident Evil's past, which kind of tended to focus on. They had more cutscenes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and this one, it also gives you something we could talk about right now is the fact that it's a first-person perspective. It kind of puts you in the shoes more of the main Jeez, I can't talk. It puts you in the shoes more of the main protagonist than other games in the past have. Because you're in that first-person perspective. We never really see what Ethan looks like. Like, we're always looking through his eyes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, like the first person perspective, although I liked it from a gameplay standpoint, I think from a story standpoint, I really don't give a shit about Ethan.
Yeah.
And it makes me all the more disconnected to where we're going to go with him in the next iteration of Resident Evil 8, which we'll talk about later.
That's the other point I was going to bring up is that while I very much with this game appreciate it, because this game is essentially kind of a reboot, and we'll get into that, or it seems like a reboot. Am I wrong about that?
No. Well, yes and no. So in the sense that they went back to older design sensibilities within the franchise, not having linear chapter progression.
I meant story-wise.
Story-wise.
Or is this
Story-wise, it's a flat no. Like, this is a continuation.
I had thought that they had said at one point it was a reboot of the canon story.
No.
Like they were creating a new timeline or something like that. All right, so it's a continuation.
Yeah, and honestly,
either way,
go ahead, sorry.
Or all I was going to say is either way, that's kind of irrelevant. I thought they did everything well in terms of setting up Evelyn and all that, like we talked about, and setting up the story of the Baker family and all that. Honestly, just like Delaila said, the weakest part was both the writing and the fucking voice acting for both Ethan and Mia I don't give a shit about them. It seems like neither of them give a shit about each other. Like,
so one thing I'll say about Ethan's character is I feel like he's at no point mad enough at his wife.
Yeah.
Or gives a shit. Or like it never seems like they're actually in love with each other. Like Mia leaves a message.
I think
like,
something you have to
have a good life, Ethan. It's like you're his fucking wife. Like,
okay, I think what you have to keep in mind about that is they were 3 years apart. He thinking that she's dead and her being basically trapped to the point where she can't.
No, I'm talking about the point. Going back in time, the point at which she recorded that message for Ethan. But I get your point.
But she probably thought she was going to die. She didn't think she was going to survive that. Shit was going down on that boat.
It's just the intonation that the voice actor brought to it was like it was weird and unbelievable for like somebody.
I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that for sure. But to talk about Ethan, like. The only criticism I really have about Ethan's character is, he never really seems like he's mad enough at Mia. I feel like he should have been a lot more pissed off at her. Like, I'm sure, finding out after 3 years, she's still alive, sure. But, like, she outright lied to him and kept her life and career a secret. And when it was, like, something this crazy that she dragged him into, like, he should have been way more pissed off. And we got that in like very short spurts, like at the beginning of the game when they finally meet back up, and he's like, "I want some fucking answers. Like, what the hell is going on? Why are you here? What the hell happened 3 years ago?" But
Yeah, honestly, like the entire time on my second playthrough now, I was just thinking, because I knew that Mia being cured was the canon answer.
yeah,
It's what I picked the first time. I picked it the second time just because, look, that's what role playing the character. That's his entire
yeah,
purpose for being there. I just wish, like, if I had been writing it, just I would have been like going with what you just said, Mark, being pissed, and I would have gone along the lines of, well, maybe Mia has a bit more of an insidious side to her, devious side to her, and maybe create some kind of actual conflict that behind that choice where like maybe Ethan grows a bit closer to Zoe, actually give him more than two interactions with Zoe
yeah.
and build that character to where it's actually a choice.
Yeah,
And maybe yeah, go ahead,
I was gonna say
Delilah.
at that point, like throughout the game, Zoe's just kind of guiding you through the house, and so you kind of just feel like she's just like a recording and not actually a person until you finally do see her with Mia, and then you're like, well, this bitch just lied to me, and I don't even know her, and she's related to this crazy ass family who's been
And
like
it's like
attacking me this whole time,
Yeah.
you
and it's
know.
like, all right, I'm gonna cure my wife. Deuces, Zoe. I know you just helped me survive, but
Yeah, and I did give the cure to Zoe for one of my playthroughs because
Okay.
I was going for the platinum this time around, and yeah, so basically Mia like sacrifices herself. No, she completely turns into the other side of her when she's infected, when she's controlled by Evelyn,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
you have to fight her and then you kill her. And she doesn't go on the helicopter with you, which like feels a little empty. I guess they both feel empty, but that one just, yeah, it didn't feel canon. It didn't feel
they
like, it felt
they
like we
both
did all
die,
that for
right?
nothing. Zoe dies too, yeah, because I forgot how she died, but
So Zoe doesn't die.
she doesn't.
We'll talk
There's a
about that.
DLC,
We'll talk
yeah.
about that at the later.
Oh,
We'll talk about that later when
okay.
we get to the DLC. Um, let's. Okay, so yeah, like what I want to really say about Ethan is, I think he's portrayed well as like at the beginning of the game being he's an everyman, he's helpless, he's got no combat training, and you can kind of feel that in the
He's
gameplay and the gunplay.
he's an insert for the player essentially. I felt
Right.
like
I do
Yeah.
feel that they did a pretty good job with giving him personality over time and just like conveying his frustration. Well, he's not a silent protagonist, which a lot of first person games tend to fall in the trapping of giving you a silent protagonist because they, I guess, want to fully immerse you. But no, he is a character, and he does have quips and things to say to other characters. And over throughout the night, he does get frustrated and let it out a little bit. I like what they did with him in that regard. I just think that, yeah, with his plight of why he's there and his reactions with Mia being alive and trying to kill him and not really giving him any answers, like I feel like he just didn't get mad enough at her even after the night
Yeah.
was over. Um,
I
but
would have liked a bit more. I think I would have enjoyed him a bit more if he had like some of that Resident Evil 4 Leon spunk, like those cheesy one-liners that Leon would give off.
uh-huh.
Like if Ethan, I mean, I know they probably purposefully avoided that, but I
Yeah.
felt like it would have like given him some Han Solo charisma there. Would have in the face of like all this shit he's going through, just like out of frustration, would have added something.
So let's
I
talk
don't know.
about
It's just my 2 cents.
that's fine. Let's talk about the other big bomb dropped at the end of the game, besides just who Evelyn was and finding out what was going on there. But when you go and you stab Evelyn with the syringe and give her the cure, she goes to calcify, but is already way too out of control and becomes this giant hulking monster. And a helicopter flies over and gives you a mysterious gun that you fire at it, fully calcify, and destroy it. Helicopter lands, and off walks this weird looking dude with a really long face and says, "I'm Redfield." It's like,
Yeah.
who the fuck are you? Do you guys? I know that we've all replayed this game. I don't know if you can think back to what your thoughts were in 2017 when we all first played it. But what were your guys' reactions to that guy coming off and saying, "I'm Redfield"?
Like I said, I had assumed that it was a story reboot.
Okay.
So almost like I said before, sometimes playing these kinds of series can feel like being into comics. So I assumed it was kind of a reboot in that sense.
Okay.
So I was confused when I first saw that because I didn't know if okay, so wait, did 6 and 5 and 4, did all that shit happen? Does Leon Kennedy exist in this universe and all the rest of the characters? And I wasn't sure, and I just didn't know what to make of it.
I just thought it was their way of connecting it to the bigger Resident Evil universe. Like they're using him as like the conduit to connect the stories.
I guess what I mean is, I guess I'm more so referring to the drastic change in character design.
Oh yeah.
The way he
looks.
Okay.
This strange ass man
did that. He would have looked far better if they kept his OG from Resident Evil 5. That design.
What's funny is they're walking it back with Village, but we'll talk about that. Yeah, my gut reaction playing through the game and that man walking off that helicopter, taking off his helmet, saying "I'm Redfield" was, oh, there's an Umbrella logo on the helicopter, and this fucking dude claiming he's Chris Redfield. Like, this is an imposter. Like, this is they're pulling out the rug or some shit. We find out from Not a Hero, and also I think Capcom had to clarify after the game came out in an interview somewhere that was indeed the real Chris Redfield, which left fans going, really?
Yeah.
But
I feel like that would have been so much of a cooler moment if it actually looked like him, because then it would have been fan service at that point.
Yeah.
Everybody would be like, "Oh shit, look at who it is!" After all this crazy stuff we've been through.
And it's weird decision to do that kind of. And like, I'm not against doing a character redesign. Like, I'm not fully against it. I understand that it happens, but with a
Spider-Man.
I guess we'll throw some shade that way. But with a character like Chris Redfield, who has been in the franchise since the beginning, since 1996, he's got like a pretty clear cut design that they've kind of stuck with and modified, but still kept relatively the same all throughout. So this guy definitely threw me for a loop. I mean, a lot of people for a loop. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, even knowing that it's really him and knowing that that's the same Umbrella just reformed was still a huge surprise back then. It's still really interesting to think about now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were speculating if he was like bad.
Yeah.
At this point of the game.
Exactly, because Umbrella's always been the bad guys.
Yeah.
For as long as they were a company or a corporation, they were the bad guys. So reading more into it, and I don't know if this is ever explicitly brought. It might have been explicitly brought up after the original Revelations, but I can't completely remember. It's been a long time since I played that game too. Umbrella actually winds up reforming and trying to make amends for all their past misgivings. And this blue Umbrella, which is what we see at the end of this game, is that. It's a reformed, ostensibly good Umbrella corporation that's trying to...
I actually kind of like that idea.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, It's a nice way to shake things up and not just keep using the same scapegoat for a villain behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's like in Dragon Ball Z when Vegeta, becomes a good guy, and he's one of the coolest guys in the show.
You heard it here first, folks. Resident Evil is just like Dragon Ball Z. Delaila, did you have anything you wanted to?
Nothing to add to that.
Okay.
I don't know if, do you want to get into the DLC later since we're talking about him?
I mean,
or...
I pretty much just want to talk about, we don't need to talk like much more than the story of the DLC. We might as well jump into it. And this is why,
I mean, the DLC is like it is only an hour and a half, and there's barely really any story to it.
There is, in the sense that it gives us an explanation behind why Chris is working with Umbrella, because Chris is still with the BSAA. They hired him on because they needed to catch Lucas. And this is where we find out what was going on with Lucas during this whole game, because he was definitely noticeably different from his parents. In that he was kind of more in control. And we find out that first of all, it's interesting to think about the fact that Lucas is basically like a genius.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought the DLC really fleshed out his character specifically, because before that I thought he was just some nut job.
But like even the main game, like you go into his bedroom and he's got like invention trophies everywhere. Like he's very, very clearly set up to be like an intelligent character, but he's still just really fucked up. There's that one note in his bedroom about how he locked some kid up in his attic.
Which, when you put it that way, it kind of sucks that the DLC ends with him. He's the final boss. You kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you could have done something with this.
Yeah. But it sets up that Umbrella hired Chris from the BSAA still to capture him, because what he's been doing is he's the one that's been taking care of Evelyn and keeping tabs on her and sending the info, the data, to the Connections, this new player now in the Resident Evil universe. They're another sort of, I don't know if they're a pharmaceutical. I feel like we don't really know. Oh, I think actually there's a note about them being some big crime syndicate.
Now, Connections, is that on? I took it that it was just capitalized as a weird like spelling thing. Like I didn't realize Connections is what it was actually called.
I think that's the name of the organization. Yeah.
Okay. That's a lame name.
Yeah, it's kind of a lame name. But that's that's seemingly what they're called, the Connections. It's some sort of crime syndicate that created Evelyn and the other series before the E series, perfecting it with Evelyn. So Lucas has been working with them. We even get the note that he like was hired on as their lead scientist, and then he killed all the other scientists because he was just a whack job.
He, instead of focusing on the E series, he just created a bunch of mold to like fight one another and fight everything.
But that we find that out about him, and he was sending them data. Evelyn's now gone, and you were sent in to capture him. You wind up killing him. That's kind of what Not a Hero boils down to. But I felt it was important because of all that additional information. We had no idea what Lucas's role was in the main game.
Yeah.
Until we like find his lab and we get an idea of what he was doing down there, but like not enough. And we also didn't know really anything about her origins, where she came from, who Mia worked for, and what they want, what their end goal is.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, even his little section in the barn, which he turned into like a fun house kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even that felt a little disjointed from the other fights in the garden, in the greenhouse with Marguerite, and in the old house with Jack. It just felt so different because he was in control, and I just never understood why he seemed like he had so much. Like he was a trickster, and like why did he have so much control, but Marguerite and Jack were completely lost?
Yeah, and again, it's another thing that the DLC answered. The Connections gave him a vaccine to stay in control and resist Evelyn's urges, or resist her impulses, her control impulses that she would send. He became immune to her because they hired him on to keep tabs on her and send them data. I kind of wish this DLC was somehow, or at least the information it conveyed was somehow included in the main game. Like, even if it had just been, if they had trimmed some of the fat, and I think we'll talk a bit about the pacing of this game.
Mm-hmm.
If they had trimmed some of the fat earlier in the game, what could have been neat is if, it's just fully integrated into the game where Ethan is saved, Evelyn's defeated, and now the end boss, the end goal is to go get Lucas, and suddenly you're playing as Chris. And like, even trim some of the fat of Not a Hero, don't make it like, that hub with like all the other rooms that you have to go in and stuff. Just like have this big gauntlet with like the gauntlet that you do through the salt mines, change that to being from Chris's perspective, going through that gauntlet and fighting all these other molded and stuff with new like super powerful weapons, give the player a power trip and go fight Lucas as the final boss. I think that integrating that into the game would have made a lot of this information, important information, more, I guess, accessible to the player. I mean, I have to imagine not everyone went and played this, even though it was free.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I'll push back on that on 2 points. The first point being, I think it was pretty clear that Capcom was using this segment as an experiment to play around with the new first-person perspective and play around with the level design and see what a more action-oriented approach to the design overall of the game would look like. If you were to, give the player if you were to give the player the same kind of power they had in, like, say, Resident Evil 4 or 5 within this perspective, how would you do this on the level? I think this DLC was very much an experiment.
Well,
I would also just, to add another point, I would push back on the information that we learned from this is probably I cared about the least. At the end of the day, like, I felt pretty content at the end of the original game. Like, yes, we didn't know what happened with Lucas, but the fact that we got that hint that he's communicating with some mysterious force, and then Redfield shows it leaves little bits dangling for the series to continue on.
Yeah, I wonder if they just wanted to do away with Lucas completely in preparation for 8, because they couldn't find a way to like elongate his life for a whole other game. But I agree with you. It didn't do anything for the story as a whole. It just did something for Lucas, who felt disjointed from the rest of the family that we encountered.
I suppose I can agree with those points. I can agree with those points. I think there's a way they could have done it, but I'm not and that's not to say there's anything wrong with the approach they took. I don't think there is anything wrong with the approach they took. I think the information that we got out of Not a Hero, it does have quite a bit of weight to it, like centering around
in the
like
universe,
right, in the universe.
Yeah. No, I get you.
I suppose as a whole, like with just a self-contained story, it's not all that important. But as someone that's trying to figure out, like, what the hell does Lucas have to do all this? Who the hell are the connections? And, in 2020 now, knowing we're getting probably in a few months, we're going to be getting Resident Evil Village, which is I'll mention a little bit about. I don't want to spoil like too much from the trailers, just in case anyone's going in blind. But it's definitely a direct continuation from this game.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure we're gonna be hearing more about this mysterious connections organization, and who knows what else.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been. Yeah. I think some of that information would have been welcome in the main game, because I know after I beat it, I had these questions, and
I think another problem is that at the time where they were laying these plans out for 7, I don't think they were even thinking about continuing Ethan and Mia into 8.
Maybe not. What I do want to bring up is that Not a Hero, and maybe we could just segue into the DLC, because a lot of the DLC wasn't just spur of the moment, let's make this, let's add this. The only one that might fit that bill was End of Zoe. But there was an ad for Not a Hero when you beat the game. Like as soon as the game came out, they were advertising like, "Hey, this is coming in the summer," and then it later got postponed and didn't come out till the fall, if I recall. But also a week after the game came out, we had the first DLC pack, which isn't great. I mean, it depends on who you ask. The big argument there is, well, if it was ready so soon, why didn't you just include it with the game? And something we can get into is how I'd say little there is from the get-go in terms of bonus material, which is something kind of jarring for a Resident Evil title. Resident Evil titles are pretty much known.
Mercenaries. Actually, based on the DLC, Not a Hero, like, because it basically segments of it are mercenaries.
Yeah.
But it turns out mercenaries doesn't really work well with the limited enemy variety and options given to you.
Yeah, you know what? Let's talk more about the main game before I go into the conversation about DLC. We'll put a pin in that for now. But yeah, you brought up a point to talk about as the enemy variety. How is that, guys?
So I love. You go.
Only 4 variations of molded maximum, right? There was the liquor looking thing, the regular molded, the molded with like the sword, and the big bloater molded, and that's it.
I never really put it together that those like fucking
and the bugs.
Yeah, but
bugs.
I wouldn't even call those. I wouldn't even call those molded. They're just like big ass mutated fucking. I don't even know what those are. Horseflies. They're like massive ass fucking.
Yeah.
Bugs just flying around. Oh, and there's also those like cabinet spiders.
Yeah, but they didn't really attack.
They don't really do shit unless you get too close.
The fucking face huggers, yeah. Or no, the face huggers don't come in until the DLC. I don't think.
What are you even talking about? Face huggers?
Are you talking about Alien Isolation?
No. They're basically like that. I don't think they come into play until the DLC though. There's that section in the DLC where you turn on the elevator shaft and then they all come out.
Yeah, there's like little molded. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, a point to make about Not a Hero is it does add like 3 or 4 new enemy types.
But they're not really new enemy types. It's just they can't be hurt by normal ammo. Yeah.
They're the same shit. They have slightly stronger attacks. They're a little faster, and yeah, you need special ammo to beat them.
I will say that in the main game, the lack of enemy variety didn't really bother me. Because it's a really short game. In my opinion, it's well paced.
All Resident Evil games are short. I kind of will say that this is one of the longer ones with this formula. I should say it's one of the longer Resident Evils with this whole. You're in a mansion, go explore it and figure out your path. Not like a chapter based one like 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, I was gonna say like those games can go like 15 hours, like 20 hours, depending on if it's your first playthrough or whatever, for like 4 or 5. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, the enemy variety didn't bother me because the level design was done really well, and how they strategically placed them was done very well. And it would. Whenever you did start to grow tired of them, they always made sure to throw in like an awesome fight, like the chainsaw fight, the Margaret. I really loved the boss battles in this game.
Yeah.
Honestly, and yeah, like it just I don't know. It didn't bother me as much in the main game.
Yeah, it didn't bother me as much, mostly because I really liked. They were more obstacles than anything, just to get from point A to point B. Where the real boss fights were like Jack, Marguerite.
Yeah, you could run, and if you were smart enough to conserve, and you wanted to conserve ammo, there were ways to utilize the level to run around to get around them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that the enemy variety bugged me. Delilah, you actually brought it up and made me realize, like, I never really put it together that the four-legged, like, crawler type enemies kind of are this game's lickers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
really thought about it that way. But yeah, like, what I do think is cool is if you play the game on Madhouse difficulty.
Oh my god.
Uh,
I just started doing that.
well,
Fuck.
what's so cool about it is, like, it really is like a fresh playthrough. I haven't played it since like 2017. I didn't play it again recently for this because I didn't want to put myself through it again. I just wasn't in the mood. But what was cool about when I played Madhouse was when you go down into the basement of the main house, where
The
like
first one that pops up.
no, like the main house. So you go
Yeah,
down to
that's what
the.
I'm saying.
Oh, sorry.
That's where the first that's where the first molded pops up, isn't it?
Oh, when you're on your way there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
down there are some roaming around. On Madhouse, you go down there and there's nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, or at least not initially. There's nothing initially, and it like kind of plays with your expectations. You just played the game. Now, when you go through to play it on Madhouse, you think you know everything, and then it throws you for a loop like that. No, there's nothing down here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, keep going. And it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And they also changed like the key, how you get the keys. You have to get antique coins in order to get one of the keys.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
So you have
the
to be
crow
on the
key.
lookout. Yeah.
Or scorpion, whatever.
It's one of them. I think you were right. I think it's the crow. No, maybe I don't remember.
Scorpion is scorpion.
It's been forever. But I like when harder difficulties do that, when they fundamentally change up the design, and when you think you know what you're doing, they do something like that to totally change things up. I think that is the best kind of upping the ante and increasing the difficulty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Completely subverting the player's expectations by changing something that they think they know. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. And they also, even Marguerite and Jack were like on cocaine. Like they just ran at you so fast.
Yeah. Yes.
They did the same thing with Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 remake, where if you play it on hardcore, he freaking ran at you.
Yeah. We haven't really talked about the Bakers too much. I guess let's start by talking about Jack. We're gonna be jumping into some DLC talk while we talk about this. By the way, I just realized there's a big point about Jack that I want to bring up. That's delving into a DLC. When we get there, we'll get there.
Okay.
But yeah, how did you guys feel about Jack and the initial impressions of him and whatnot when you're roaming the mansion for the first time?
I love it because it's just a crazy man. Like
Yeah.
he's taunting you, he's making fun of you. Like,
I guess what I
and
mean is sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh no.
But
Go
like
ahead.
more specifically, we played and did an episode on Resident Evil 2, right? And we're all familiar with Mr. X and how he's constantly stalking you, and you can down him, but only temporarily.
Oh.
Jack kind of has that,
Yeah.
but I think it plays in with the pacing of the game. I don't know about you guys. I got through the main house during the period of time. He was only roaming the house once, and I only had to deal with him once before I was out of there and didn't have to deal with him anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on normal mode, like it depends. Sometimes you get unlucky, sometimes you don't. But yeah, on my playthrough this time, I only really had to deal with him once.
And what's funny is I think the only reason I had to deal with him was because I went upstairs to use the crow key. Is that the first key you get?
Yeah,
Or is
that's,
it- or is it the
that's
scorpion key?
That's a scripted. One of those is a scripted event, I believe, though.
Well,
When you go into the
that's
bathroom.
at the very beginning of that's yes. That is a scripted event, but I guess I mean after that I only had to deal with him once, and it's only because I went upstairs to use the key to get into the one room just to get an extra item that I didn't need to get, and that was the only reason I ran into him. Otherwise, you can go through that whole game without realizing that he roams the house.
Yeah, the first time you encounter him is when you're first trying to get the key to go into the garage. Then the second time you could avoid him if you go straight to the bathroom and get the item you need, but he's still on the side there. But you only know it if you go for the extra items or like the Mia tape and things like that. Because you could go back and get the dog head when he's finished roaming.
Yeah.
You don't need to get it right then and there.
Yeah, yeah.
So like I think if you know where you're going, you know what you're doing, like he's really not much of a threat.
Yeah,
you can avoid him really easily.
Maybe that's the problem. It's maybe I just know the game too well and didn't have to, but I don't remember having to running into him many times, even the first time I played. I guess what this kind of comes down to is I like the level design of this game, but I do feel it was a little too narrow. And having to go to other rooms to find other things, it didn't quite... What I'm realizing is it doesn't quite live up to, say, Resident Evil 1's promise of having to jump between two different wings and solve puzzles and get items to progress. It doesn't really ever hit that scope in this game, which to me is a little disappointing. And that really becomes apparent in how little I ran into Jack, because there's not really many points where while he's roaming around you have to go upstairs and thus run into him. You like you said, Delaila, you can do all that after he's already been quote unquote killed in the boss fight in the morgue.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like in Resident Evil 2 Remake, just because that's in my most recent memory, he's constantly stalking you for almost the whole time you're in the police station, and even when you leave. And so he's always like a threat that continues. But this game, it's like Jack was the threat, then Marguerite was the threat, and then there wasn't really a threat after that, and they were threats for so short.
In this game, it's kind of a half step back to that original formula, because while they do have that whole idea of like, yeah, you're in a mansion, here's a map with rooms, and you can only get into certain ones once you have this item, and you can only progress once you have these 3 items or whatever. Like, it kind of fulfills that promise, but it only goes so far to really fulfilling it, because it's not like Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 2, let's just say, because both the original and remake have this, or Resident Evil 1, even to an extent 3, where you're running back and forth between these maps, grabbing new things to progress in other areas, You know what I mean? And it never really hits that.
And there is that element, like you have to go back to open the snake doors or the crow doors, like, and that stuff you get later in the game, like after you finish the greenhouse and maybe even Lucas's section in the barn. But you don't go back and have to, like, Jack isn't always in that house when you go back. And I think that would have added a lot. They
replaced him. They replaced it with molded, but I mean, you can just kill them.
Yeah.
And I even this time, when I played through, I mean, I knew a lot of this has to do with just me knowing the game. I didn't run into any of them. I mean, the ones in the big room, the big foyer, I did have to fight them because they're in the fucking way. But like when you go upstairs and have to go into Lucas's bedroom with the snake key, nothing popped up because I just went from door to door and boom, I was done.
Yeah.
It just doesn't hit that same level of blind and lost exploration of planning out your routes and memorizing which room is which. It's so truncated that it's not really hard to remember that this room is Lucas's bedroom, this room is the game room, this room is, you know what I'm saying?
It definitely feels a lot smaller than other Resident Evils of this variety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say to that is, as a result, I also feel that there's not really that many puzzles, and what there is just way too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They replaced like what could have been like more complicated puzzles with just these shadow plinths that aren't
Yeah.
hard.
No, they're just matching up shapes. The only puzzle I would say that gave me a hard time was the happy birthday one.
Yeah.
That was the most clever one.
Yes, that was really smart. And it's a good thing you brought that up, because I didn't really have anything about that in the notes. You get a videotape that lets you play that out as Clancy, the camera guy from the first tape at the beginning of the game. And that's ultimately how Clancy dies, is solving that puzzle and burning to death. But from a design perspective, it's really, really cool how they give you that videotape. You play through it to see what it is that needs to be done in order to beat it. But there's certain things that if you don't have to do if you already know the solutions.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you go through as Ethan, he already knows the combination to the one door, so he could just open it up and get the thing. He doesn't have to spill a bunch
light
of
the candle and
he has to light the candle, but he doesn't have to release the gasoline in the room.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to get his
arm
etched.
You can't release the gasoline in
That's how you die.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is watching that videotape, playing that through gives you the solution, and when you finally get to it, like, you basically have to do the puzzle twice, but the second time you're supposed to cheat it. And I think that's really smart design. I think that's really clever, and easily the best puzzle of the game.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that's not saying much.
No, it was one.
Yeah. It's actually ironic, because you're right, it is the best designed puzzle in the game. But ironically, like, all that shit with Lucas, that was the least fun I was having in the game. I don't know.
Yeah, same. Not the least. It was compared to Marguerite and Jack.
That's what I mean. Like honest, it's weird, because as much as I liked the Marguerite fight, like, it just, the game started on such a high between, that first face-to-face encounter with Jack, where he fucking sticks something through the back of the cop's head, and then you have to get in the car and fucking just plow him into the wall with the car, and then the chainsaw fight, and then all that. It just starts at such a high, and then feels like it slowly go. I mean, the Marguerite fight is awesome too. Then I feel like it kind of slowly tapers off a little bit.
So let's double back, because we got so sidetracked. We started talking about Jack and then got into a conversation about the level design and the puzzles.
Sorry about that.
No, we all did it. These are all so connected that it's easy to go off on tangents. But
Jack seems like a good guy once you read the notes and realize that the only reason why he's acting like a nut job is because of the molded and the control.
There's like a telekinetic connection you get with him at the end of the game.
You get that vision.
Where he's and that was probably one of the best parts of the game for me in terms of story. Yeah. Just because it's like he's a normal dude. Yeah. And he's like, I'm sorry, boy, I wouldn't hurt you. And then, neither would Marguerite or my girl here, or even Lucas.
I will say the Daughters DLC. So, yeah, we'll talk about that real quick. The Daughters DLC, I think if I recall, you play from Zoe's perspective, and it's when your family starts going or getting corrupted by Evelyn. It's right after Jack and Lucas find Mia and Evelyn in the swamp, bring them back, and Evelyn starts corrupting everyone. Yeah. You see the transformation of her parents getting corrupted, and it's sad. It's really sad.
It's a tragedy. That's the best part about this story, is that it's a tragedy.
It really is.
This dude discovered a little girl in the middle of nowhere and decided to help her, and he gets fucked by it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he even, when he started noticing his symptoms, he was changing a little bit, he went to a psychiatrist. There was a note in his bedroom saying, I tried to go and see what's going on, and they just couldn't figure out what was wrong. I took my pills, and yet this was still happening, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So he was really trying to avoid this from escalating, but got out of hand.
And
that little bitch.
I think that's why Jet, not just because his fights are the most memorable parts of the game for me, but just his character overall.
He's the best
like,
character in the game.
Yeah, he's the best character in the game by far for me. He's
Same.
definitely the most fleshed out and the most interesting.
Yeah,
I feel at least.
and no, I agree with you on that scene, like being one of the better, if not the best, like plot scenes of the game, because it's surprising. He's very candid. He's a completely different character than what we've seen the entire time. This is where things start to piss me off and get undone, though, with End of Zoe. Because End of Zoe takes place after even, if I recall, yeah, it takes place after Not a Hero. Yes, it 100% takes place after Not a Hero. So at the end of Not a Hero, when they take down Lucas, and another thing is he was transmitting data to the connections, and Chris stopped that. By destroying the computer. For what it's worth, I'll just throw that out there. But Chris is notified that he has a phone call, and that phone call was Ethan. So when he gave the cure to Mia instead of Zoe, and he said, "I'll send help for you," that's at the end of Not a Hero. That was Ethan calling Chris, telling him about Zoe, and that's when End of Zoe comes in. And if I recall,
when was the phone call? I don't remember this.
At the very end of Not a Hero, someone, whoever the operator on Chris's side said, like, "Redfield, you have a call" or something.
Oh, I remember. And he says like
that. Yeah, we don't know what that is until you play End of Zoe. You know what that is. That was him telling, or Ethan telling Chris about Zoe. And End of Zoe, you play Jack's brother, Joe, who it's actually kind of fun. It's a fun DLC. You go through the swamps as Joe, just like punching Molded in the face.
Yeah, I remember reading about this, and like you eat worms instead of herb or something like that.
Yeah, you eat like grubs. It's kind of a fun twist on that game's like formula, but story-wise, what I'll just say, and spoilers, if anyone wants to go play these DLCs, like, I'm sorry, you skip ahead like a minute, if you don't want spoilers for it. There's a swamp man stalking you throughout the DLC, and what your end goal is to go save Zoe, because she's calcifying. The swamp man is Jack, still alive somehow after you defeat him. He's like progressed so far in his mutation that he's just still alive somehow. And Joe winds up killing him. But that's the issue. It's like
it breaks that whole story arc.
Yeah, like we get that closure with his character of, "I'm no killer, son." Neither's Marguerite, none of his family is like that, except for Lucas.
It's the best voice acting in the game too. Props to the voice actor for Jack, like going back and forth between like that manic, crazy, howling guy, and then at the end, you really believe it. It's really heartfelt. Like
but just to close it out with End of Zoe, I guess like you could look at it like it's still tragic in that he's so far gone that he's not even in control anymore. But I think they should have just left him dead, like it was as he was in the main game during that final boss you have with him.
It would have been more interesting. That DLC, Zoe is such a missed opportunity in this whole story.
I agree.
Like you should have just played as her. It would have been far more interesting to like, I don't know, maybe have like you're fighting. I don't know. Maybe you have to get some specific item and you're fighting against a gauge that's slowly showing your transition to the other side. I don't know. I don't know what should have been done with it, but there should have been something more to Zoe throughout the entire thing. Because when you think about it, you talk to her like a few times on the phone, and then you see her like twice.
Yeah.
I think I don't know about the main game. I think a DLC more substantial than Daughters, where you play as her after like during or after the events of the main game. I think we definitely would have been more interesting for her character. Daughters was pretty much just like playing out events that we already knew about. And End of Zoe is just like it's kind of goofy and kind of sullies a lot of the weight that some of the scenes, some of the events of the main game had, which is a shame. It's just a shame.
Glad I didn't play it.
Yeah, and the reason I said only play Not a Hero, besides the fact that it's free, a lot of these DLCs, they don't really have like they don't have plot that's like too important. I could just run through them.
Not a Hero barely has anything that's too important.
Again, it has like some background information that I thought was.
That's what
important.
I mean.
Yeah,
it's more like super to the universe. It's important,
and
not necessarily to this plot.
If anything, it acts as like kind of an epilogue to the game.
Right.
But the fact that it was free, and it was short, I figured it was worth playing for us. The other ones, there's Bedroom, which you play as Clancy, that's trapped in a room, and it's kind of like an escape room DLC. It's not important. Nightmare, which is you play as Clancy. You're in the basement of the main house. Jack sends a bunch of enemies your way, and you got to fight them. It's just a horde mode DLC. I talked about Daughters. 21, again, you play as Clancy. You're forced to play You're forced to play 21, a card game, against another prisoner that Lucas is holding. And he throws in like other cards to like throws out rules. Again, not important. And then there's 2 like bonus modes. Ethan Must Die, which is like procedural. The items are procedurally generated, but the path is always the same. It's really tough, and you got to get Ethan to the end. And then Jack's 55th birthday, which is like a score chaser. They added a lot of DLC for this game.
Yeah, they didn't need to do all that.
Yeah, and something I alluded to at the beginning, the first DLC pack was available like the week after the game came out. I feel like the problem that I have with this game, we're jumping all over the place. We gotta get back to like the characters. But I guess I'll just make this. Well,
the only character we haven't talked about is Marguerite. So.
Yeah, we'll get. Let me just make this point, and we'll jump back to that stuff. The real crime with this game, I feel, is after you beat it, just from a fresh, like, it's just the game, like you have none of the DLC. After you beat it, the only thing you could really do is play the game again.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really been a thing with a Resident Evil game since, like, Resident Evil 1.
Mm-hmm.
Resident Evil 2 added, like, they had the 4th Survivor mode and Tofu Survivor. 3 added Mercenaries. 4 had Mercenaries and, like, the Ada campaigns. 5 had Mercenaries versus mode. Like, additional DLC they put out after the fact.
And not only that, 4 there were like also weapons you can get on a second, like crazy shit,
they
like
all,
unlimited RPGs and time. Yeah,
so they all have that. But and 7 has that too. But again, that all comes back to replaying the game, and that's kind of the only thing out of the box that 7 kind of has at its disposal, and anything else it parsed out as DLC, and that just doesn't sit well with me for a mainline Resident Evil title. Not to say that it makes me like this game too much less, but the value proposition with this game out of the box was definitely lacking compared to pretty much every Resident Evil before it, which is very disappointing.
Do you think, and this is just speculation on my part, because like we said before, this was the first game with this engine. Do you think maybe
they needed to recoup the cost?
Possibly. No, well, maybe that the development of the engine itself came at the detriment to the time that was given to actually develop the game itself.
While
in terms of...
I would agree with you if the turnaround time for the DLC's release wasn't so quick.
Well, the DLCs weren't that substantial.
So They kind of
And
were
they
because,
reused a lot of assets.
but still, a week later, they put out the first volume, which had 3 of those things that I just described, all included. And then I think not too long after that was the second volume that had 3 more things.
Maybe you're right.
I was gonna say, sorry. I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree in terms of the value proposition. Like other games had a lot more going for it to expand the experience. But I feel like most of the time, I don't particularly enjoy the DLCs. But that's just me, and maybe there are people out there who enjoy the rest of the stuff. But it also had VR, which, to your point, it's still replayability.
And yeah, that is a good also point that we haven't really brought up. Is that this game right out of the box did come equipped with it fully playable in VR.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just a whole different experience from just like, speed running or playing the game on a harder difficulty. And I would agree with you wholeheartedly that it is probably the Resident Evil that has the least added to it. But then I remember Resident Evil 3 Remake had shit, and it probably could have been a DLC for Resident Evil 2.
I would say the thing about Resident Evil 3 Remake, though, is that it also did ship with Project Resistance.
Oh, yes.
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Once again, a piece of the game that I did not give a shit about.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, if the content's there and you just don't care about it, at least it's there.
True.
Yeah. Like you can't argue that they didn't. You can't argue that they didn't put time and care into putting that in with the box.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have to pay anything extra for Resistance.
And it was a whole other platinum too.
Yeah, which is
thank God for
we're
that. Talking about Resident Evil. But yeah,
I guess it's a matter of taste of the kind of DLC. Because like you gotta looking at the other games, there's difference of what kind of this is a first person game. There's a lot of experimentation in the series going on in this game, in terms of moving to the first person, completely shifting at least. From the outset, we thought they were completely shifting the story to a new angle. Whereas, in the past, you had things like Resident Evil 5. There was co-op gameplay. So, like, even just replaying the story is fucking... You just get on the phone, get your friends over.
Yeah.
I remember doing that ad infinitum, like, all throughout college with my friends playing Resident Evil 5.
I guess the point that I'm just trying to drive across is that... I don't think there's a good enough reason for them to have parsed a lot of this content out as DLC. It seems pretty obvious to me that they could have included it with the game and given the game more of a value proposition. It's the fact that they were parsed out as opposed to all past Resident Evil games having that stuff included in. This time it was separated, and it kind of made the game just a little bare bones in terms of what else can you do besides replay it.
And not only was it separated, but they also charged for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the banned footage was like $10 per pack.
I think you just answered the question there, Delaila.
Yeah, that is the answer, and I don't know. I think they stopped that. Or hopefully they will not do that going forward. They didn't charge for Project Resistance.
Yeah.
So
it seems like they're on the right track so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much bad to say about modern Capcom, but that was definitely, for as good as much as I loved Resident Evil 7, that was definitely a rocky start of the Capcom new renaissance.
It was a strong start as a whole game, but it was rocky, in terms of I think they got a little too in their head about it, and when they released the DLC.
I would agree.
They were hungry.
Okay, that took way longer than I thought it would. Let's go back. So we
Marguerite.
I think we've talked about Jack enough. Let's talk about Marguerite. There's not too much to talk about with Marguerite. She's overall
old woman.
What?
Oh, I was just gonna say she's just a pissy old woman who doesn't want anybody touching her little girl. That's all.
With the nasty.
And as
Delilah
pointed out, she has vagina bugs coming out that snatch.
So yeah, she's kind of she's not like as important as Jack, because Jack, we get major story beats with him and we see him a lot more. Marguerite's just kind of a threat in like a new location.
Which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really like
love-
that section.
No, yeah, that
I like-
section was cool.
I like that boss fight. The level itself that you fight in.
Yeah.
How expansive it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots
You
of
go up and down the ladder, and she transforms, and I thought she was the creepiest looking creature in the entire game.
Oh, for
when
sure.
she transformed into that vagina bug lady.
Yeah, because she's got the nasty crotch nest.
It almost reminded me of the dude from RE4 when he when the barn lights on fire and he like
Mendez?
his spine. Yes.
The big
except
cheese.
It's a woman. Yeah, the big cheese. Except she crawls on walls and spits out bugs from her vagina. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah. That was so stressful when like she'd retreat and I'd hear her like giving birth to more bugs. It was so unsettling, and then you finally find her and she's like even jumping in the walls and through holes and shit.
How could she do that? Like, why her? Like, why couldn't Jack like shit out, bug babies? Like, what? How does that relate to the mold?
Chainsaw. That's why.
My roommate and I were talking about that. Like, of all the people that are infected, like she is the most unique.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's like I don't recall there being like a reason for that, like any sort of special mutation with her. I have a feeling it just boiled down to them wanting a unique enemy design for her, so they gave her like power over bugs.
Yeah, and she's always talking about my babies, and she's very protective of that little shrine with the arm on it.
Yeah.
But it was a very enjoyable boss fight, I found at least. It just points to another thing I love about this game is that how fucking gross it is.
Yeah. It's so gross.
I love it.
A lot of that comes down to the RE engine being such a good, pretty engine. It's weird to say pretty when everything is so nasty in this game, but yeah.
Right.
Like the entire game, you're reminded of the fact that within the first opening act, your hand is severed off and like haphazardly stitched on, and it's like held together by just a few pins and like a plastic watch.
Yeah, you just see Zoe fucking staple it on, and you pour some of I didn't remember this either. With like the first time Jack is stalking you when you're still in that like west wing of the mansion, there's a scripted event. It's like semi-scripted. If he catches you, it'll happen, but you don't die from it. He like chops off your leg.
Yeah.
And it's sitting there, and he's like, "Here, go ahead, pour this on it," and he gives you a first aid med to reattach your leg. I didn't remember that.
Well, that can happen. That can happen at any time.
Oh, can it?
Yeah. So at any time in the game, I think that's why they put it there to introduce you to that mechanic, because in certain scenarios, if you have a certain amount of health, and then you're hit by like those kind of throughout the game, there are spread those one hit shots. Sometimes it will happen that Jack will. I think this is specific to Jack. He'll cut off your leg, and then you have like a few seconds to use a kit if you have it to heal yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And then he sews his leg back together, and I think you could see his sewn leg throughout the game, which I thought was pretty cool.
I mean, you can definitely see it on his arm.
Yeah.
Which is
But we talked about Mia as a character, but like her boss fight was really cool too. She was one of the first bosses. Like when first you fight her and she's coming at you with a knife, and then you have that sequence in the like living room area where you grab the axe, and you gotta fight her. Yeah. And then she gets the chainsaw, and you're fighting her in the attic. She looked freaking creepy as hell. I thought that was done really well.
The design with the eyes, pitch black. Yeah, it was.
And you
awesome.
Even see that. It's also cool because we see that transition in her face.
Yeah.
Go from totally normal, and within a second switch to demonic Mia. that stabs your hand and sticks it to the wall with the screwdriver and then cuts off your arm. Like, it happens in a split second. Really, really cool transition. And then at the end of the game, when you start hallucinating Evelyn and you start seeing the visions of those moments with Mia, you see Evelyn in Mia's ear, and she's the one that's kind of like pushing Mia to do those things, to suddenly switch and attack you, which was really cool to see at the end of the game when we know more about everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, Delilah, it's a good thing you brought that up, because that's the first boss fight, and it is really cool because there's not really another boss fight like that, in the sense that, like, even when you're fighting Jack in the morgue with the chainsaw, like, that's the second half of the fight. The first half is just pretty much gun combat, but that first fight with Mia, you have that hatchet, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of introducing you to guarding as well.
Unless you're me and you accidentally go into that fight without the shotgun and with no ammo.
Oh yeah, like the
Jack fight.
Jack.
I went into the Jack fight with nothing but a knife and an herb.
I love that for the listeners.
I basically had to kick. I had to kick the body bags into him and like poke him with the knife until he got the chainsaw.
Yeah, for the listeners, Jason let us know that he forgot the shotgun, and I hit him with the sweet nectar of knowledge that you can go back upstairs.
I didn't realize
before that fight. Yeah, because when you die, you spawn still above, so you could just backtrack.
No, I thought the door behind you locked because of all the. Because there's that massive swarm of molded that comes out in that section, and you kind of have to just bomb past them.
I mean, you could also kill them, but I guess you couldn't because you only had a knife. But still, that's impressive that you did that. That, like, the body bags thing was pretty cool. It was a cool mechanic to kind of stun Jack.
Yeah.
It's a shame there weren't more things like that in the game, like with other bosses. But
yeah, they tried to do stuff like the flamethrower mechanically with how the bugs would swarm certain areas and you had to flamethrower them out.
Yeah.
Flamethrower them out. But I agree.
Yeah. I guess we've covered, like, was there anything else we wanted to say about any characters?
No.
I think
No, I mean, like, Marguerite's pretty one note. We already talked a lot about Lucas Jack.
Yeah.
We already there's nothing really to talk about with Zoe.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
Mia, I mean, we talked about Ethan. Mia, what did you guys think about the whole boat section and, like, the revelation that she's an operative?
That's what I want to bring up with this point about pacing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like a duo thing.
Yeah, because this game, the biggest criticism, and I'll preface this by saying I don't mind it so much. It doesn't bother me all that much. But this game's primary criticism that I see thrown around frequently by people that still like this game a lot, say that it drags in the third act because of that boat sequence. So after you cure Mia, you go out in the boat and you get attacked by something in the swamp. It's just mold controlled by Evelyn, but it then switches perspectives. It's a Resident Evil game. Of course, you got to play as a different character at some point. You switch perspectives to Mia going through the boat and then playing a videotape of past events and finding out, that Mia was an agent that was transporting Evelyn from one location to the other location, labs for the connections to do research and stuff. I think the reason for that was that a competing company was after her, was trying to steal her. We don't know who that was. But we play those events and then we play more on the boat as Mia, but in present day. And after that, you still have to go through the swamp briefly and then the salt mines and then the lab and back to the house. But how did you guys feel about this last third of the game, this final bit of pacing? Did you feel that it was too bloated or dragged out?
Yes. If you would have told me like, oh, at the end of this game you play on like a haunted ship, I would have been like, hell yeah, that sounds like a really cool idea. But then when you're actually in it, yeah, like you have way less weapons. You got to collect everything all over again, and
See,
yeah,
that's where I think I don't have a problem with doing the whole haunted ship section. And on one hand, it's like a double-edged sword because on one hand, suddenly pulling the rug out from under you and making you weak again after you've just like super powered up and have like super amounts of ammo and like grenade launcher and
Plus,
flamethrower and all
that all happens right after you do that big boss fight with Jack, where he's like a big
Right.
eye monster.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so on one hand, pulling the rug out from under you and making you weak again is like a cool gameplay thing. On the other hand, I think this is why people feel like it's so slow, is because you become so weak again, like Delilah was saying, and how it kind of just feels dragged out because of that.
Yeah, and this is the part of the game where you actually have to go from point A to point B, up and down, all around, figuring out where to go. And the only threat are the mold there, which you're kind of already annoyed with at that point. I think it would have been a lot more interesting to have like one big like bat on that ship that's stalking you while you're going to these areas. But instead, it's just like these obstacles that you've already faced in the game, and it's just very uninteresting.
I mean, if you
would have
ask,
been cool if it was like the captain or something that was like stalking you. I don't know.
Oh, that could have been cool. I will say my least favorite enemies are those fucking crawlers, because if they jump and you miss, they're such a pain in the ass to deal with, and they're the ones that are like fucking patrolling the hallways. So I kind of got a little bit of that, of just like something stalking me and being frustrating to deal with, and being helpless at the very start of that and having to run from room to room hoping there was ammo for your little pea shooter gun. And also healing items, because those things are so frustrating to deal with. Like it was stressful to me and did up the atmosphere. Sorry, go ahead, Delilah.
No, I was just gonna say it was so much less interesting than the Baker House.
Oh,
like,
I
the
do
Baker
agree
House
with that.
was full of details and it was grotesque and it, like exploring it despite it being disgusting was a lot of fun. This was just like everything looked the same kinda. There was really no personality to each area of the ship. Like you did get some notes to see what happened, but it really lacked substance and it could have just been a cutscene. It could have been a cutscene. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was. I personally didn't have too much of a problem with it, but I can see where the criticism comes from. I definitely agree, though, that it was a lot to just throw in the game only to learn that short, like 2-minute about why Mia was there and who she really was.
Yeah,
I think.
Because you're basically, how long do you estimate that section was overall? Like 45 minutes, an hour?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it doesn't break it for me in terms of pay. Like, what I do think is that the criticism probably comes from the fact that you basically do that section twice, because you do it as a flashback, and while it's like much more guided and there's few in the way of threats, or fewer, I should say, you are still going floor to floor looking for Evelyn and ultimately going downstairs, finding her, and then coming back upstairs. And then after you do that videotape, you basically do it again, but in present day. And like there's new puzzles and stuff, there's new things to do and new and enemies to find, items to find, even weapons and stuff. But you're still basically doing the whole boat twice. And I think, it should have been truncated to like maybe you do part of it in the videotape and you do a little bit of that, but mostly all new areas to keep it fresh in the present. And I guess I'm somewhat contradicting myself, because you also do the happy birthday sequence twice, but that's like such a small self-contained puzzle that it only takes 10-15 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Combined with both of those moments combined, yeah, like you said, Jason, this is like
Assuming you
45
don't fuck
minutes,
up.
an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Yeah. Assuming you don't fuck up.
I fucked up like my first one. I'm like, oh shit. I walked into the room and did the thing. And as I was sticking the candle in, I'm like, fuck.
But yeah, that's I could see why that might be an issue. It didn't bother me, but I acknowledge that it's a problem. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I can understand why other people were bothered by that section, felt that it was bloated and elongating the game unnecessarily, kind of throwing off the pacing. Because then also after that, there's more game. you still have to go through. You still have to go through the whole mine section, which is pretty much just a
shooting gallery.
Yeah, it's just like an enemy gauntlet, but it's still a sizable section that you have to go through. And you know, when you're playing a game like this, there is a point where you're like, okay, I just want to finish it. Like like this should be done by now. I want it to be done. I can understand why people would have gotten to that point prior or at around that time and felt that the game was dragging. It just didn't really do it for me.
You could have just done a thing where Mia explains to you and then suddenly she's captured or whisked away and you have to pursue her to the mines or whatever. Like I could have seen that, but at the end of the day, for me personally, I didn't mind, but I accept the criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the last there's two more big points I want to get to before the final question. We've been talking about the gameplay. How about the gunplay? How do the guns feel? How do the weapons feel?
It's a survival horror game. The gunplay is never good, which is fine. I particularly had an issue on Madhouse fighting Mia in the attic because you had to get nothing but headshots.
Yeah, that fight is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's really hard to aim because she like sways and then runs at you. So like it's there, you know, the gun swaying, being slow. It's there to create suspense, and it's fine.
I mean, personally,
go Mark.
No, I mean, I just want to say, like, I feel like this is a pretty common thing where how gunplay feels in a game is best judged by how the shotgun feels, and I think the shotguns in this game are pretty satisfying personally.
Yeah.
But them and the flamethrower are probably the only guns that are, or weapons that are satisfying. I think all the pistols suck.
Yeah.
Except okay, and this
the
is kinda,
enhanced rounds are good.
This is and this is kind of digging into the other point I want to make, which is collectibles / unlockables. But the Albert handgun that you get for beating the game, which is the one that you use at the very end of the game to beat Evelyn, that handgun is satisfying to shoot. None of the others are. That's the only one, and it's because it has so much weight to every shot because it's such a powerful handgun. I guess the Magnum is also like pretty satisfying. It's just every other handgun just feels.
You barely get ammo for that thing.
It feels like a fucking BB gun.
But I feel like the guns aren't really supposed to, because it, like Delaila said, it is a survival horror game.
Yeah, but it's still a first person shooter.
Yeah, that's true. But I personally never really had much of a problem with the gunplay or the weapons. I just felt weird with the first person's perspective. I never had a good grasp, at least in my experience, of my distance to the enemy, especially because so much of it is avoiding melee attacks. And I also started to realize that I was an idiot, and I forgot that like there's a whole blocking mechanic that I probably should have used more. But like I would turn and try to sprint like around an enemy that was coming at me.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was getting hit from behind or like grabbed by one of the bakers. Like it was really hard. It felt like to judge your distance.
You know, I'd be interested to watch like no damage runs on like boss fights and stuff because trying to dodge trying to dodge enemy, and like it's even hard. We go the classic Resident Evil with tank controls. It's hard to dodge that shit. In first person with this game, it's near impossible, at least for me, because you turn to try and run past an enemy and get behind them, but you still get hit. And the blocking, unless you have those special items that you get for doing like certain things and beating the game in like certain amount of time and shit.
Yeah, like the defense coin and whatnot.
You still take damage if you even get like a perfectly timed block. It's just a very, very minimal amount. So I'd be interested to see like, I mean, it's I'm sure there's plenty of runs of people doing these boss fights and stuff without taking damage. I'd just be interested to see how they manage it, because dodging and avoiding some of these enemies, especially the bosses, is such a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But
it would just have to be knowing their patterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even still, it seems hard.
But yeah, I mean, I wanted to bring up gunplay. I feel like it's important to talk about with a first-person shooter, and other than the shotguns, I felt like
I agree with you that the shotguns were my favorite weapon.
Yeah.
I also I talked a little bit about this like when we were talking about Resident Evil 2, but like the catharsis of like solving an item puzzle, especially like the one to get the broken shotgun and then fixing it to get the double-barreled shotgun.
I didn't even know about that until this playthrough.
Yeah, the catharsis of doing that, I love that shit. I eat that shit up. It's so cool to me. It just feels so nice, like getting something like that, figuring that out. And I wish, like how in Resident Evil 2, I wish there was more of like the environmental puzzles with the locks and combinations and shit. I wish there was more of like stuff like figuring out that shotgun puzzle to get the extra shotgun, or even the broken handgun wasn't really much of a puzzle. You just kind of find that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that kind of feeling was just really cool.
Mm-hmm.
To just finish it off with like collectibles and unlockables, talked a little bit about it. Like there's the coins, there's the Mr. Everywheres. Jason, did this game pass the Jason test? Did you look for notes and read them?
Notes? If they came across, I just read them, but that's just because it's a Resident Evil game, so I know like I should probably at least check out the notes.
Okay.
But I mean, as opposed to our previous discussion regarding Alien Isolation, it wasn't like well integrated into the gameplay. At the same time, you didn't need to read the notes to really fully understand the plot was all there.
Yeah.
If you didn't read any of the notes, they definitely do provide like a greater, more encompassing look at the background, like Delaila was hinting at before. The devolution of someone like Jack Baker, who seemed like a pretty cool guy, into what he is when you meet him in the game, like his notes talking about going to the psychologist and whatnot. But
yeah,
and like you were talking about the hints they give about Evelyn, but otherwise they don't really do anything, so it passes the test in that sense. Like it doesn't, you don't need them to understand what's going on. Action. Oh, sorry, go.
No, please finish.
The only notes I can think of is like the ones when you create the serum that you inject into her. There are the two notes that are attached to the thing when you put the head and the arm in there. But it's like, whatever, you're making a serum to fucking kill the final boss, whatever.
Yeah.
This is just science mumbo jumbo, like to explain what it is.
Okay, so it's like if you walk into class and the teacher decides to give you a pop quiz, but it's like the easiest pop quiz ever. Like in that sense, it passes the Jason test.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff to be found in the notes, but it's not like central to what's going on in the plot. Like the plot breaks down to essentially like, all right, Ethan needs to kill all these fuckers and get his wife and get out. Like, that's really all that's going on. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. The notes were my favorite collectibles. for the reasons that have already been said. I wish they would have used the notes more for puzzles. I really like when horror games do that.
Yeah.
Like even if it's a stupid
Yeah.
code
That's-
or like a hint
Yeah,
at
like-
something you need to open or
like Alien Isolation. Hey man, by the way, the password is 1234. I changed it. Okay? Like,
yeah.
But like even old.
They had
Go ahead.
They had one of those. They had one note like that. I think for the clock that you had to unlock in the grandma's room.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, that's the only one I think. I'm pretty sure you're dead on. Like, yeah, I just recently I played through Resident Evil 0 for the first time, and like that had like a bunch of puzzles where you had to find a file that like gave you a hint to the solution. There's at least like 3 puzzles in that game, probably more that I'm just not thinking of, that have that sort of thing where you have to seek that stuff out to fully understand what it is you have to do to progress. This game, unfortunately, only had one of those, and it was really obvious.
Yeah.
So.
But the antique coins I thought were cool, not because they looked cool or anything. I just like that if you collected them, you were able to become more beefy.
I like that. It rewards you for seeking them out, but I feel like they didn't give enough rewards. There were only 3 things you could get, and one of them increased your maximum health, one of them increased your reload speed, and the other was the Magnum. I feel like if like even with the same amount of coins, give more rewards that cost less coins so that you're more often like finding these things and getting rewarded for seeking them out would have been more rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I don't really know what else they could have given you.
It wasn't like, I mean, granted, completely different types of games, but it wasn't like saving up like 1,000,000 pesos in Resident Evil 4 for the RPG or whatever.
I think
the
you mean
Infinite
pesetas,
whatever. I was in my head. I was like, wait a minute, pesos.
That's a currency in
Spain. Yeah, Mexico, not Spain. But excuse me. But yeah, I agree with you that like the antique coins is kind of like meh.
And the Mr. Everywheres are just like, if you get them all, you get something special after you beat it. It's like the fucking, like you brought it up during last episode, Jason, the Keratin frogs in like Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah,
they're just like a little hidden thing that if you find them all, you get like a special title or something. They're not that special, but the unlockables in this game are also kind of lackluster. Like the best one you can get, and I forget what you have to do to unlock it. It's like one of those special runs where you either have to do it. I don't think it's the one where you do it quickly, or it might be the one where you don't heal or something. Maybe it might even be the reward for Madhouse. I don't remember. The circular saw.
Oh, that's for speed running.
That's for speed running?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can unlock a circular saw. And that's another thing, is like this game kind of breaks Resident Evil tradition, not only in that you don't end the game with a rocket launcher,
yeah,
but you don't unlock an infinite rocket launcher for the speed run.
Yeah.
Which is something traditionally that's been a thing in Resident Evil. Instead, you get the circular saw. Which I get it. A rocket launcher would have been kind of weird in this setting.
Yeah.
But
dude, it's Resident Evil, man. Like I've said so many times and so far in this discussion, it's like comic book. That like I look at, like, aside from Final Fantasy, favorite series Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid, and when you actually look at Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil, like they pretty much share everything except one has crazy robots with nuclear weapons and one has zombies and bioweapons. Like they both got like crazy shady government organizations and companies and super soldiers and spies. So you could throw a rocket launcher and who gives a fuck? Like,
yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I'm kind of making up an excuse for why they went the direction they did, but I don't know. Circular saw, it's a thing you can get. I don't know.
I messed up Jack on Madhouse with that thing in like 2 seconds. It made it easier than normal mode.
It's a good weapon because, I mean, it's the best weapon you can get in the game. It's just, I don't know. There's a
It's
lot.
not as cathartic as blowing somebody up.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. Thank you. You put the you got there. You got the words
Yeah.
and
Like when you could rocket launcher Mr. X at the end of Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 2 remake,
you
it
don't have
just
to
felt
go
so
through the
good.
fucking the song and dance of waiting for Ada to throw it down. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real nice. All right, anything else you guys want to talk about before we hit the final question?
No, just to summarize, I
Nah.
really love the level design. I really love the boss fights. I thought the setting was extremely creepy. I'm glad they went back to the horror roots, and it was a really strong way to start to 2017. I remember really liking that game and
Yeah.
like remembering it towards the end of the year.
I think that was my game of the year that year. I don't know if you guys remember.
Was
don't.
it?
It might have
Huh.
been. It might have been my game of the year that year.
Interesting.
I remember. Yeah, I don't think there was any other game that year that I played that year. Like if I had played a certain other game that I know we've brought up
Yeah.
before and really want to do an episode on.
Oh,
If I had
okay,
played
see.
that game in 2017, that would have been my game of the year.
So
that
wait,
year,
you like
but
that better than Nier? Oh, you're talking about Nier.
I'm talking
Okay.
about. I'm talking.
You're
yeah,
talking about Nier.
I'm
Okay.
talking about Nier Automata. Yeah.
Yeah. Horizon Zero Dawn was it for me.
But yeah, I do want to say I feel like I've been really hard on this game this episode. I do want to say I love this game. I've played through it a million times.
Yeah.
Or not a million times. I played through it like half a dozen times. I'll play through it another half dozen times. I do really like this game. Playing through it again made me realize a lot of its flaws. And
Yeah.
you know, what would we be, podcasters, gamers, reviewers, what have you? What would we be if we didn't talk about this kind of stuff, you know?
Damn, you really picked this part more than I did. This is
I
amazing.
Yeah.
This
know,
is a
and
first.
I love
That's
this.
true.
I love
mean,
this game still, but like, yeah,
No,
there's-
I love it too. Really, my main contention is just the main characters, like Ethan and Mia. Like, I was like,
it's
and
funny.
Zoe.
That's
That
like
it's they really should have done something with that. I don't know.
no, I agree with you there, and
Yeah.
I find it funny. Like I'm actually sitting here defending Ethan. That's like the one thing you don't really like. But okay. Anything else before we go to the final question?
No.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy one. We've got Resident Evil Village coming. Like I said, probably it's the end of October as of recording. Like
Isn't it February?
we'll probably be. We don't have a date yet.
Oh.
But like that here's the thing about Capcom. As of the past 3 years, they love Q1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been
Yeah.
releasing most of their titles in Q1. I have no doubt that they'll continue that, and we'll see Resident Evil Village released in Q1 2021.
Well,
Yeah.
So it's coming down the pipeline probably very soon.
haven't they? Wasn't one of them released at the end of Q4? Was it this one that was end of Q4? Because
no,
Q4 goes beyond January, or it goes into January. I'm sorry. It technically goes past like the end of the actual year.
Oh, well then Resident Evil 2 remake was January, I think.
Yeah, so that would be the end of Q4.
So, well, then this technically would be too, because this was January 24th.
Because I know that's why a lot of companies have started going past the holiday season.
That's all a bunch of nonsense to me.
Well, no, it's because of
I
stockholder-
know, I
yeah,
know,
it's business
but I
stuff,
still
yeah.
think it's ridiculous. Just quick, I just looked it up real quick. Yeah, it says early 2021 so far for Village, so we can safely assume that's when it's coming.
I
But-
really wish these games would release in October, like October 1st.
Yeah,
I
it's-
really wish.
it's
I'm
silly.
so tired of playing them after like Christmas and the beginning of the new year.
Yeah, you want to start off the year? Let's get spooky.
Yeah. Which, like, fine, I'll play a horror game anytime because I really like them, but there's something about playing them around this time of
No,
year
I mean,
that gets me hyped. I
Deli-
mean, we did 2 episodes.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it when we do our plugs or whatever we've been playing or doing. But like, yeah, Delilah, you and I both played like horror games all month.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I love doing that too, and that's part of why I wanted to go back to this game. But anyway, the final question: Resident Evil Village on the way looks to be a continuation, not only of this game's story, but also a little bit of its design. It's still a first-person game, focusing on the same characters. What do you want to see, without spoiling, like what we've seen story-wise in trailers for this game? What improvements do you want to see from Resident Evil 7 going into Resident Evil Village?
I want to see Ethan get mad. I want to see some drama between him and Mia.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there definitely has to be. I think we can all agree there has to be character development.
Okay.
But leaving that aside, as an actual, like, from a gameplay perspective, I would like to see the level design open up a little bit, and this would fit so well thematically, given that it's Village. Borrow from Resident Evil 4 a little bit.
And I think
if you all remember, one of the coolest things that shocked everybody about Resident Evil 4 when we first got to play it was that each area of the map was like a set piece of like a few buildings, and it wasn't like linear. You could choose whatever building you wanted to go in. You could block doors with shelves. You could bar up windows, and you would get mobbed by all the different villagers. So seeing stuff like that, using the environment against enemies from that first-person perspective would be, I think, pretty cool. I don't think we're going to get that, but I think it would be awesome.
That's what a lot of people are speculating, is that this is going to meld like the best things of Resident Evil 7 with the best things of Resident Evil 4. I mean, the best things of Resident Evil 4 is like everything about Resident Evil 4, if you ask me. But it seems like it's going to be kind of a marriage of the two. I think even when we saw like some footage in like a Capcom Talks video, we saw a currency in the corner of the menu. And seemingly it's going to take a lot of those pieces of design and integrate them into what we got with Resident Evil 7, which will be really cool to see. And I look forward to seeing how they handle it.
I would also like to see them utilize the map system that they had in Resident Evil 2 Remake, where whenever you cleaned out a room, it like blued out. Because they didn't have that in this game, which was fine. It was earlier than the remake, but I really like that feature for these kinds of games.
I agree.
I think the other reason is because of this game, they were respawning enemies when you went back, but...
Well, by cleaning out a room, it
you
changes.
Mean item-wise?
Yeah, item-wise.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The map, once you got every item in a room, the map would change the color of the room to indicate you have everything from that room. If an enemy's in there, it's still going to change colors. It's just, the enemies are inconclusive. It's just about the items. Yeah, Delaila, I agree with that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Gimme.
But also, going back to what you were saying earlier about like replayability and content, they definitely need to improve on that. There needs to be more of a variety of tools that you can use, reasons to go back and play through the game, alternate options like this. The choice that you get in this game really doesn't mean anything, especially because there's only one canon ending. Like,
yeah,
give more optionality, more open up the gameplay a bit more now that you've proven what you can do with the engine.
Yeah, that's something.
The design, yeah.
That's something we didn't really bring up, is like how inconclusive that and how little it matters that choice that you made. Like Delaila, you talked a bit about it by talking about the other ending, but we already resided to the fact that Mia getting cured is the canon choice, and her being on the helicopter is the canon ending. Having that choice is just, it doesn't really matter. All it really does is add the fact that Mia, you have to fight Mia again briefly.
Yep.
But yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. I would like to see all those things in Village. I really want to see them not take extra modes and make them DLC. I would like to see those
mercenaries,
be unlockable modes after you beat the game.
Imagine if there was online co-op mercenaries, first person.
Maybe that get me to play it. and I just want to note, I'm not against DLC. I buy DLC. I play DLC. It did not rub me well now or when the game came out that there was so much DLC for this game and the base game had basically nothing other than replaying the main game. And the main game is super replayable, obviously. But with nothing else to do except spend $10 to get more things to do, and for that to happen so soon after the game launched, doesn't sit totally well with me in a franchise that's, for all the things that it's known for, one of those big things is its bonus content.
Yeah.
So if they're gonna implement, I want to see them implement like new modes and fun extra things to do after you beat the game, but have them be there like out of the box.
Yes.
And I don't see that being a tall ask. I think that it'll happen, given that it's happened with both Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. And hell, Resident Evil 2 did get post-release content, and it was free. So
Yeah.
it's not something I'm too concerned about. But with everything we've talked about tonight, I did want to mention that as a big hope of mine. But yeah, everything else you guys said, I totally want to. So, yeah, you guys got anything else to add, or are we going to wrap this bitch up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. What's the score?
Yeah, Jason, what's the score?
I hadn't really thought about it. I think, you know what, off the top of my head, like Mark said, we criticized this game a hell of a lot. But from a fundamental level of just playing the base level design, the base game design, combined with a serviceable plot, like, yes, the main characters kind of suck, but everything around it is pretty good, or decent to good, I would say. Evelyn, especially Jack and Mark, like the Baker family and the kind of the tragedy of that. I would give it, I'll be kind, I'll give it a 7 herbs. Should do.
7 herbs.
Yeah, so a good game.
Okay. All right.
7 out of 10.
All right. There we have it. 7 out of 10. 7 herbs out of 10. Resident Evil 7. Oh, how fitting. All right. Delilah, what do you...
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Wow.
Delilah, what are you doing? What are you doing with life?
Work sucks, but besides that, work's been like eating up my life, so I've been playing video games at such a slower rate. It's driving me crazy. But anyway, what I'm actually doing, besides working hard, is playing Madhouse difficulty as a full playthrough on my YouTube channel. I'm gonna release a second episode after this recording, so it'll be up by the time you hear this. And I released the first episode already. And I'm doing Kitties of the Corn. It's the name of my Halloween series, which any horror game I play in the month of September and October is dedicated to that series. All it means is that I'm playing horror games during spooky time. That's all. There's nothing else to it, because that's all I play during this time. And the game that I've been mostly playing is Phasmophobia, which is a really fun game to play with friends.
Okay. What else have you played, like, horror-wise?
Well, before this, the game that we did, Alien Isolation, and in between that, I started Amnesia, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but it was something that I didn't really enjoy streaming, so I stopped streaming it.
Gotcha.
But I might go back to it till I get the platinum and play it off camera, because there's a lot of like exploring in that game, and I don't think it makes for good content.
I actually almost started it last night.
Yeah.
Because so I do something similar. I've been playing horror games all month. Yesterday I went to start Silent Hill 3 and realized that my TV is way too dark. It's hard to play. It's hard to play games on original hardware on a television that wasn't around during that time.
Yeah, for what is it, CRTV? There's
Yeah.
the what is it, refresh rates and all that shit,
Yeah.
different coloration.
Yeah. So playing an inherently very dark PS2 game on a modern television, basically resulted in me being basically unable to see anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got about 20 minutes in and decided I'm not going to play this until I have a CRT available to me, which I probably will by next year. So I'm going to replay all the Silent Hills next year.
Huh.
But yeah, Delilah's been streaming. I've just kind of been tweeting out my thoughts as I beat certain games. I've beaten so far in this past month. We did Alien Isolation. I finished Deadly Premonition, which,
Oh, cool.
holy shit, that's a fucking trip and a half that I would recommend to anyone. I beat Luigi's Mansion for the first time.
Oh, I started playing that too in September. I only play it on the train though, and when I'm watching wrestling on Wednesdays.
Are you doing Luigi's Mansion 3?
Yeah.
Okay. I did the first one because I've never played any of them.
Okay.
No, I mean, like, my roommate's also been trying to get me to play 3.
It's honestly, you're better off just playing 3.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's just like the best version of all of them.
I didn't really care for the first one, to be honest. I played Resident Evil 0, as I mentioned earlier. We did Resident Evil 7, and I also the most recent one I played through was Alan Wake,
Oh, nice.
and I really really liked that. Yeah, I really liked that game. We could talk about that more off air, but yeah.
I just want to say I highly recommend Medieval if you're looking for like cool Halloween games to play. That game is so
yeah.
good.
It's like not it's like thematically great around this time, but it's like it's a cartoon. It's like a cartoonish like kids game, but it's still like so much fun. And I feel like that game. I didn't play it originally when I was younger, but
It's like a video game that could have been made by Tim Burton. Like,
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's the design of it was super fun. I had a good time playing that last year when it came out.
Yeah,
For
same.
sure.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Jason, you doing anything?
nah,
All right, good talk.
I work, I work out, I cook, I sleep. I'm like a serf in the old medieval days.
You did. It does look like you trimmed your beard, though.
What?
It does look like you trimmed your beard.
Yes, I did trim my beard.
I know this is great for an audio show, talking about
Yes.
your physical appearance, but
Yeah, they might. The audience does not know, but I did at one point look like fucking Rasputin.
anyway, if you liked the show, please give it a like, give us a subscription. If you're listening on YouTube, give us a subscription, give us a thumbs up, comment on the show, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, tell us something you'd want us to cover. Maybe we'll get to it in like 5 years. Who knows? we do the show monthly. I know it's slow moving, but we thank you so much for sticking with us and listening to the show. If you do, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, give it a rate and review, 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. Constantly looking at that stuff and taking feedback into consideration. So if you've reviewed the show, thank you so much, and if you haven't, please do so. I'd be eternally grateful.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you like the show as well, like, share it with people. Let them know about this cool podcast with these 3 idiots that talk about video games and spoil them for you. We'd love that. Really, truly.
Yeah.
So, guys, it's October 20th. We are just a few weeks away. We're less than a month away
Yep.
from next generation hardware.
Yeah.
What are we doing about that, Jason? What game are we playing?
Na 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 na. We're playing some Spooderman.
Some Spooderman. Wait, but
Spider-Man Miles Morales.
oh, because I was gonna say we already did Spider-Man, but there's another one coming.
Yeah, this fucking imposter from the Ultimate Universe
Oh my
that should
God.
have stayed there.
Here we fucking go.
Oh no.
If you, all right, yeah, like longtime listeners will know that the Spider-Man episode was pretty contentious. If that one was bad, I can only imagine how this one's gonna go.
Well, I mean, I love Spider-Man, and I watched the cartoon when I was a kid and read the comic. I did read the comics until anybody who's into the comics will know when I stopped reading the comics. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the game, like gameplay wise. I had problems with not even like what they were trying to do with the story, just how it was constructed, and it just felt like it was overstuffed. And
If you, yeah,
anyway, watch the episode.
yeah, go listen or watch the episode on Spider-Man. I would say definitely do that and definitely play Spider-Man before jumping into Spider-Man Miles Morales, and definitely before listening to our episode about it. But yeah, that's the next game we're covering. Next gen's around the corner. Very excited. And yeah, hope that you guys join us next month.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.